need to chillax with the fish oil.
Yeah, I think you can definitely take too much. If you take enough fish oil, I think it gives you the runs, which is probably not a good thing. Welcome to Late Stage Internet episode 5, everyone, where we advocate for mildly disordered eating, talk about shit going on. Chris, what is going on with you this week?
I have these nights sometimes where I just have like bad stress dreams and just get like no sleep, and it kind of comes out of nowhere, and I have some ideas as to why, but last night was one of those nights for me, and I just had like repeating stress dream after repeating stress dream, and I was like waking up like once, I don't know how often I was waking up, but waking up a lot, so I like physically feel like shit today. So
good. Okay,
yeah,
me too.
Doing great. Maybe it's also Thanksgiving food hangover for me. I don't know, but yeah, I'm doing okie dokie. How's things? You told me you're on a liquid diet right before.
I'm on a liquid diet. Yeah, I'm on a liquid diet. I'm trying to civilize the mind and make savage the body, and so my body felt disgusting. So I've been having a lot of green drink. So I feel very healthy. And now I'm drinking a margarita to celebrate how healthy I feel. So bottoms up, everyone.
How do you handle alcohol? Does it not faze you too bad?
Yeah, I'm mostly fine. I'll probably be like a little bit slower maybe tomorrow morning, but I've also got a thing of water here, so as long as I stay hydrated, it should be. It's not a huge deal. I think I handle it pretty well. It's got the Slavic genetics.
Yeah. I should handle it much better. I think the two most dominant things in me are German and Scottish, so you would think that alcohol wouldn't knock me out the way it does, but if I have one beer, I can feel it the entirety of the next day.
My God. Woof. That's rough, man.
Not like hungover, but just like cognitive head fog.
Mm. Are you on antidepressants? Can I ask that?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right.
No, I'm happy to talk about drugs anytime, but I am not.
I'm on a buttload of antidepressants.
Yeah. Does that help with processing alcohol somehow?
No, it makes it much worse. Yeah, my tolerance was much better back before I had my dose upped. But maybe I can get my dose lowered again. I've been feeling really good recently, so I don't know. So I'm going to stop taking my meds. There we go, everyone. That's what you're supposed to do.
That's how to fucking do it.
Right. Then you stop and you're like, why am I sad? And then, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, good times. Did you see South Korea had a coup and then averted the coup in a span of 24 hours?
I hopped on Twitter for 2 minutes today, and I saw people were sad because they thought there was going to be an alien invasion today, and everyone was like, "Oh, today was supposed to be the alien invasion day," but it turns out South Korea just had a coup. So I saw that, and I read like 5 different tweets saying some version of that, and had an okay, that's enough Twitter for the day moment.
That's enough,
and logged off and did not read any further into anything.
Wait, how did the people come to the conclusion that there's going to be an alien invasion?
This is 100% a guess, so if this is wrong, don't quote me. Here's my guess. Have you seen, every time I log onto social media in the past like couple months, like someone, maybe even in the past like year, there's been a big, like, people have been really latching on to government documents being made public that are somehow, like, proving UFOs.
Yeah.
And there's a certain, I haven't read it enough because I haven't seen anyone who's not just, like, a random Twitter conspiracy theorist user talk about it. So the moment someone else talks about it, I'll be very into talking about aliens, but I haven't looked into it any bit. My guess is that one of these documents mentioned the date December 3rd of 2024 in some way.
I went deep into the aliens thing a couple weeks ago after that the most recent like congressional hearing. And I listened to most of the congressional hearing, I think, while running, and the conclusion I came to is this is a nothing burger, as the libs like to say.
Big fan of that phrase. I love nothing burgers.
It's a nothing burger. Is that a lib or a conservative? I think it's just like a millennial thing.
I think it's just
at this point.
I think everyone says nothing burger.
I feel like there's a political slant to everything these days, like the McDonald's distinction, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
You are of a very certain political leaning if you say McDonald's.
Yeah. You probably think the Iraq War was like the best thing ever, but also Trump is kind of based. So you're like stuck between like neocon and like like MAGA person, I think. Because a real Trump head would say McDonald's because they know how to pronounce it correctly because it's their favorite person's favorite food. But the boomers want to say McDonald's because it feels right.
Yeah. So who's saying Mickey D's?
No, dude. Does anyone say that?
Someone's got to be saying it. What about McDick's? Is that just a
McDick's.
Is that actually non-political? Is that just a college thing, like a high school college thing? Okay, so I think we found something that's non-political.
But it's like frat boy, which skews conservative.
Yeah. Yeah, like I would definitely say that in a hockey locker room in college, but not like
in polite company.
Yeah, not at the dinner table.
But no, going back to the aliens thing for a minute here, the only thing, like the only hard confirmation is that like there are things in the sky that are flying around that like the government doesn't know what they are. That's pretty much it. So maybe it's aliens. Yeah, I feel like it's probably not, but
there's an ant on my laptop. Seems a little not the right time of year for that. Anyways, yeah, I mean, I'd prefer it to be aliens. Anything to give me something to be excited about.
Was that really that exciting, though? I mean, like, if they were going to do something... There's a
chance that I have to stop working.
No, dude, if they were going to do something, they would have done it already.
Well, okay, yes. But this is what I'm... Like, it's something that, like, could just, like, disrupt things enough that it would make life interesting.
Or it just, like...
It would make life like a movie, bro.
Or it just wouldn't change anything.
Well, probably. But I'm trying to live every day like it's a movie, bro.
It's going to be like when we discovered like what ball lightning was, or that fish that everyone thought was extinct. It's going to be like a big deal for like a day. And then everyone's just going to be like, I guess it's aliens. Aliens are here. They don't seem to be doing much.
Yeah. Hey, maybe we can just exploit their labor and the rest of us can live happily ever after.
That would be great. Yeah. The aliens will be proletarianized, and they will side with the masses in the forthcoming revolution.
The worst thing that aliens could do is come here claiming to be refugees in some manner. That would not be a good way to announce their presence.
They're fleeing from worse aliens.
Yeah, that would. There'd be a lot of rich people would hear that and go, I know what to do with you.
Oh my god, dude, that would be like the worst possible.
Yeah.
No one wins in that scenario. Isn't that literally the plot of District 9, if I remember correctly?
I don't know, but do you keep seeing that video essay that's like, District 9, like, revolutionized CGI or something? I don't know. It always pops up. It's like, why is this movie's visual effects so good? I don't know. The comments are all like circle jerk in the movie, so there must be something to it.
It is a Reddit movie, but it's a good movie. I think it's a little heavy-handed with it's about apartheid South Africa, and it's like probably the most heavy-handed exploration of that you can kind of possibly do. But it's a decent movie. It does look good, especially given its budget is like $5 or something. So, well done, Neil Blomkamp.
Yeah, good for him.
Good for him. Okay, well, coup averted in South Korea. That's good.
Yeah, wait, so who cooed?
Okay, so it was the president of the party. So it's a parliamentary system, and I'm a stupid American, so I don't know how these things work. But the current president is like a conservative guy.
Yeah, I know that.
His party, which is the People's Power Party, which is just the more conservative party.
How does anyone hear that and think like, yeah, like this is legit? Like, that's the most, like, fake name.
It probably sounds better in Korean.
Maybe, that's why.
But basically what happened is that he hasn't been able to pass anything because I think in 2022, his party lost the majority. And so nothing is getting done, and I think his approval rating is like 20%. So he was like, fuck it, I'm going to declare a state. It wasn't a coup. Well, it was probably a coup, but technically he declared a state of emergency to round up his enemies, who he accused of being communists, basically just like any of the left-leaning opposition, to have them all arrested. And then his own party like immediately rebuked him and were like, you're not fucking doing that. And then he made a statement where he was like, just kidding, lol. I was just playing.
Just seeing how far I could go with, try and keep getting away with it.
Yeah.
That's
I
pretty
hope,
cool.
Friend of the show, John Donald Trump, wasn't looking at that and saying, hey, like, how can I do that but better?
Hmm. Well,
We'll
I don't
see.
envision a scenario in which Mr. John Donald's approval rating is 20%.
Dude, probably not. I mean, the people who like him really, really like him. For
Dude
reasons
is. Can we even jokingly call him based anymore? Not really.
No, we can't. It's so over, dude. He's not based anymore. He's not lost the mantle of based.
Mm.
I think it's looped back around, and now Hillary Rodham Clinton is actually based.
Yeah.
The based cycle.
Did you hear that part in the Pod Save America Hassan? Did you watch the whole?
I did.
Of both interviews?
Watched for the meat of our conversation. I watched both Pod Save America Team Kamala and the Hassan.
Yeah. The moment where Lovett said, like, you know, the people who've been successful in the Democratic Party the past 20 years did so as like outsiders, like rebuking the system, like, you know, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and like Bernie Sanders or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I'm not an expert on what was going on in 1992 American politics. I need to read up a little bit more on my when I was born politics in the United States. So maybe he's right, but
no, he is right, because what Clinton did was basically kind of take that, like, Clinton is the beginning of the Dems being firmly neoliberal.
Yeah.
Like the birth of the modern Democratic Party starts with Bill Clinton. Yeah. So he was an outsider insofar as like he was a more rightward, kind of more technocratic.
So how was it that I still don't understand this one. I understand that Obama was like a good communicator and like gets people excited, but what is his claim to being an outsider? Just that he's black?
Well, it's like he also didn't have a ton of like political experience. Like he beat in 2008 Hillary Clinton in the primary.
Yeah.
Right? Like he was a senator, but he was, first of all, a relatively young guy. And not like someone entrenched in like the Democrat machine.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like in terms of like changing the Democratic Party, like how was he changing the Democratic Party?
What did he do, or what
was he running? Like, why does he get that? Why does Obama get this like outsider who changed the vision and the idea, like the policy agenda of the Democrat? Like what?
I think there's like a difference between like optics and what actually happened, which is that like optically, when Obama ran in 2008, you know, big promises around large scale reform, some of which happened. I mean, like the ACA, most of which didn't. Like closing Guantanamo Bay was like something that was like that is, you know, kind of symbolic in terms of what it represents, but that was like totally dropped. But I mean, in terms of practice as to like what Obama actually did, it doesn't, well, no, I'm going to say it doesn't feel like that much, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's just because I have heard this before, that Bill Clinton is now that you say that, it rings bells, because I've heard this before, that he is the sort of bringer of neoliberal or normalizer of it, or popularizer of that amongst the Democratic Party. And so that's like, I mean, that sucks, but like that very much makes sense as like a changing the direction of the party. But I feel like Obama gets labeled the same thing. But I don't know how to, in my head, I don't see that or understand it.
I don't.
Other than just like he's fun to listen to talk, I guess.
Because Obama was the beginning of woke, really.
But what, Obama is so not woke.
He's not that woke. I don't know. It's because he's a black guy.
Yeah.
Like, so woke.
Like, I've never heard Obama make like a check your privilege reference to a white guy or something. Like,
no, because he's a good communicator and
he's not a political dipshit. Yeah, I don't. Did woke even start under Obama? I guess kinda.
Well, yeah, I mean it did, but woke. What are the origins of wokeness? Truly, when did it? Well, really, what happened was it went from being quote politically correct to woke, which was such a successful rebranding.
Well, it was also. Yeah, so politically correct was the era of social justice warriors, kind of tied together, right? Social justice warriors weren't woke.
I guess that was slightly pre-woke before that was
right
like
before
before that was everywhere. Yeah. Well, I mean, like politically correct goes back to like the nuts.
Yeah. Well, because that was like Was it Bill Maher
maybe
who had a show that was like not politically correct, or was it one of them? Someone show in like the 2006 era.
Yeah.
That was
The most
political
based
correctness
era of politics. Yeah. Those were the good old days.
Yeah. Back when we were debating the Iraq War. George H.W. Not H.W. Well, we were probably still making fun of George H.W., but making fun of George W. for just being an absolute dimbo.
Buffoon. Little did we know how bad, if only you knew how bad things can get. No, but Trump is based because he's anti-imperialist, because there were no new wars under Trump, Chris. There were no new wars under Trump.
Only a war against the woke liberal.
Only a war against woke. In that time, we fucking assassinated Soleimani, and, you know, I like the implication that the president of the United States single-handedly, like, controls all the conflict in the world, which is, of course, true. That's what cultural hegemony means, people.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I was an employee of the Democratic Party, I might also throw out there that he initiated a war against democracy.
He did. A war on democracy, and really that's the biggest war of them all.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so Pod Save America. Are you like a semi-regular listener of Pod Save America?
I had never listened to Pod Save America prior to Joe Biden dropping out. The moment he did that, I said, I'm going to start listening to what Dems are saying about all this. And I listened to Pod Save America basically every episode from there through the election. And then the election happened and took a break from politics, and not even actually. That's not true. We started recording like right after the election.
We started recording immediately.
Yeah.
No break. We need to figure this out.
So I didn't. I hope the cat is not coming through my microphone.
It did a little bit, but it's cool. Don't worry.
It's cool. I haven't listened to the Hassan and the Team Kamala interviews, were the first Pod Save America I've listened to since the election. And so that is my Pod Save America experience. Are you have you ever been a listener in any capacity?
Literally never listened to it until the Team Kamala thing happened. And everyone on Twitter was like, this is really bad.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah, this is pretty rough. So what is the deal? Because there's two hosts, right?
There's four.
What? There's four?
There's four hosts. And the one who comes across as most, what are they called? People get mad at Dems for, like people running political campaigns like Kamala's campaign. They get mad at her because everything she says comes out of, what do they say, like focus group testing?
Yeah. Or split testing.
The one who sounds most focus group testing, like he is just a robot of focus group communication, is the one who did that interview. Dan Pfeiffer is like, the man talks about polls and how polls apply to how we should communicate, and he'll say, like, you know, the polls say that 40% of Americans want to know more about Kamala Harris, therefore Kamala should like go on stage and talk about how she, we need to give her then her 2-minute like spiel that she repeats word by word every time she hops on stage, so that they know more about, like, that's his sort of like logic and way of thinking about running campaigns. Is like, the polls say this, therefore we give Kamala a 45-second thing that we've all tested out as playing well, and she just repeats it word for word. And Dan Pfeiffer, I think, is the worst of coming across that way. He would not be the one to, if I were to pick any of the four to lead an interview where you would hope someone would challenge the Kamala campaign a little bit, he'd be least likely on my list.
Good. Okay. So definitely, I assume that, like, was he a former Obama staffer?
All four of them are Obama staffers.
Okay, so they're all Obama staffers. Okay.
Yeah. Dan was in the, like, from like 14 to 16 or later in the Obama years, maybe 13 to 15 or something. I don't remember. But he was communications something. So the guy who interviewed Hassan, John Lovett, and then John Favreau were speechwriters, and Tommy Vitor, I don't remember what he did. But Favreau and Lovett were speechwriters. I don't know. Tommy was something else. Tommy, I think, is the most, Tommy is, his podcast that he does separate from Pod Save America is one on foreign policy and just sort of like global affairs. I think from what little I can tell from having listened to a few months, Tommy is the most left leaning. And so I would have preferred to have seen Tommy do an interview with the Kamala campaign. I think that would have been more interesting. But anyways, yes. Lovett is, I like Lovett, actually. I find him to be funny, but that interview with Hassan was also
Yeah,
rough.
it was a little rough. I think Hassan did well, and I'm by no means a Hassan stan, or reasonably well.
He did okay.
Okay, we'll get to that. What did you think about the Kamala team interview? First impressions off the dome.
It reminds me of like as a sports fan, like I'm a big Yankees fan, so a lot of people hate the Yankees, right? A lot of people on Twitter spend like their whole life, like their whole day is just like tweeting about how bad the general manager and the owner of the Yankees is and like how dumb they are. And is, just they're dumb. They don't spend enough. That part I agree with, but they're dumb. They're dumb. And there's this part of me that always has this like, okay, when there's this much money involved and we've got payrolls of hundreds of millions of dollars, we're making billions in revenue, there's probably people who know what they're doing. Like I might not agree with the way they're going about making decisions, but in terms of like getting good quality player to make good money, like, these people probably know what they're doing. And then sometimes you see footage of them like behind the scenes, or you actually get them in long form like podcasts, and you're like, actually, I don't know if you're like really smart. Like maybe there isn't some secret science that all you GMs behind the scenes know that none of us know. Like maybe you're just as flawed as the rest of us. You just happen to be like getting paid to do it. And that was kind of my reaction with the Kamala team, was just like, I figured it would sound like you were smarter or sound not so lame. It's just really lame and sad and like, and just not, I don't know. Like maybe it's because they're just doing a podcast that's an hour and a half long, and so they don't want to get in depth on everything. But it just like they didn't sound. They weren't dropping like strategic points that no one had brought up in any capacity. It sounded to me like if I were to pick just the most average like liberal podcast and just listen in to the talking points of like people who are just incredibly average at podcasting and communicating, like that's what I would expect out of it. So it's just boring. And that part was really depressing. So that was my gut reaction, was just the first word that came to mind was lame.
Yeah, it's definitely lame. Because they all seem like student council kids. And that's like, I think mostly what like DNC staffers are, is that like, I don't know, I wanted to believe that these people were kind of like super intelligent technocrats or whatever, who were kind of like sort of conniving in a way, and perhaps like, I don't like their politics, but they're like smart, determined people with like a killer instinct, and I did not get that at all. This feels like these are student council kids who got caught with their pants down and handed in a paper late and got a failing grade. And like, I think a lot of the things that they pointed out like are true, but then it's like, then the follow-up question is like, okay, you're a strategist, like, okay, so you come on and it's like, all right, we have and they kept saying 107 days, which tells me that that's like, that point had been like focus group approved for them to make, like 107 days. Which, by the way, isn't even that short. Like the Brits do snap elections, I think, in like 60 days or like less time than that. So it's not like no one ever in the history of the world, like it's unusual for American politics, but in the history of the world, like that's not that crazy to prep a candidate for. But then the follow-up question is like, all right, yeah, you don't have much time, but like, what are you going to do about it? And just the answers to that felt so insufficient, in part because everything is like means tested to be like the most optimal. And what that means is that nothing is, because means testing isn't perfect. And ultimately when you're doing that, if you don't, depending on how you frame the questions, you can get very different answers. And so that can make you to some interesting conclusions. But yeah, bunch of student council kids.
Definitely a bunch of student council kids. And, elections happen at a very specific date. So at a certain point, they've got to act. But I think if they give off the perfect, they give off the sort of like joke that you would see on like a Parks and Recreation type show of like the problem with sort of well-intentioned liberal small town, or not even small town, but just like liberal politics, which is just like, oh, that seems really important. Let's make sure we've got all the best voices and ideas on that, and let's make sure we run all the required research. So before we do anything to fix the problem, we're going to create a new committee. and the committee is going to decide how to go about, solving the problem, and they'll come back to us with a recommendation, and then we can vote on it as to whether or not it makes sense. But if we don't like the recommendation, then we're going to send them back out to do more research. And it's just like, okay, it's like town hall meetings.
Yeah.
Like
Circle
infinite.
Yeah.
And that's the whole, so yeah, of course you're not getting anything done in 107 days, but I hated the part where the guy who was not, the guy who was not Pluff, the one who was in person, I think his name is Quentin, he one point mentioned when he was going through like the normal process of campaigning for president, he's like, he gave some specific time frame. I don't remember what it was, but like you've got 4 to 6 weeks to introduce the candidate to people and get let people get to know the background of the candidate. And so it gets to this point that I think people are really bad at describing. It's like the video game phenomenon. People are really bad at describing what they don't like about a video game, but they can tell when it's been sort of designed purely by what the algorithm says gets the most playing time.
By committee.
Yeah. So if it's purely like, okay, the algorithm says this gets the most engagement and recurring playing time, like they can tell it feels disingenuous. And so I think people are really bad at saying what they don't like about, or have a hard time pointing to specifically what they don't like about politicians, but they're very good at picking up the fact that nobody, particularly in the Democratic Party, is allowed to ever show who they are in any fashion. Yeah. It's all pre-written and laid out in this, and people hate that. And it's frustrating because these people live in the logic of, well, the data says that they live in like data and polls logic, where anytime you point this out, they're like, yeah, well, that's great. That's great and all, but what are you going to do when you're running a campaign and the polls say to focus on this? You're going to try and optimize to focus. And it's like, gets it, I think, one of the fundamental problems of where we're at with democratic politics, which is that, once again, people can tell that voters are a tool to help Democrats get elected rather than Democrats getting elected being a tool to help voters.
Yes.
And so like, it just, you can feel it. And the whole way they talk about people is the exact same thing that drives us all nuts at work as data points, where there's like a score assigned to our productivity and how we lean and what our strengths are and our weaknesses and whatever. And we're all just being used to help them win, which in their own circle of logic is sort of like makes sense, but they're very, very much trapped in their own bubble, like trapped in a very, very restrictive bubble that just it's weird. Like it's just hard to imagine that these are the people running a political campaign to be that narrow, like narrowly focused. So anyways,
it is, it's very weird. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of like what's going on there. And part of it is like, it feels like they didn't learn any lessons from the appeal of Trump. Like it feels like no one's even like thought about it outside of like voter propensity and like who we can message to more effectively, in terms of like, oh, actually everything like doesn't have to be super scripted, and you can freeball it a little bit, and if people like the vibe, it's like it's kind of okay, which I get is like totally antithetical to everything that they stand for, and like I wouldn't expect them to totally internalize that or like run a candidate based on that. But like if you think about that, it's like maybe being terminally data brained isn't like the best way to go about this. But I think they're genuinely epistemically incapable of even thinking about that. That part of it feels like no one was pushing back on this, and they've effectively managed to like cinch things down to the point where, without any kind of like countervailing voices, like this is it, like this is what you get, which is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, and it's frustrating because like a lot of these people like are I don't think by any stretch or in any way or like have bad intentions.
No, I don't think
in
they
their
do.
heart, and are like probably really nice people. And good. Maybe some of them are good parents and good spouses. Maybe some of them are shitty. But anyways, whatever. You get the point. They're not like. It's just that to them they're like, when you're trapped in the logic of just like the two-party like blue good red bad, it I don't know, it's like, it seems to me to be almost as strong of a probably not, this is maybe not true, but it's getting up there on like billionaire bubble, where they just sound like they don't live in the same country as I do.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and their jobs are just so different. And you would think for people whose job it is to run campaigns that there would be, it doesn't seem like they're having conversations about like the history of like the long term, and by long term I mean 20, 30, 40, 50 year arc of political norms, of political realities, of the ways people are feeling, of the way people think about politics, of sort of political like theories about how to run campaigns that exist on this scale that like actually get into, how do I want to put this? It's like they're in the logic of looking at the election itself as something that like, it's like politics exist. They're looking at politics as a sport that exists independently of everything else that it interacts with.
It's like a game theoretic exercise that they play with like motivate, or like with changing probability clouds of voter blocks.
Yeah.
Rather than something that is about people's material conditions and their ability to kind of like exercise influence over that.
Yeah. And so, you know, in the Lovett Hassan interview, there's a moment at which, and you hear this from like well-intentioned progressives, right? They're like Lovett is like, well, what do we do about this? Like, I don't know what to do, because like on the one hand, I'm like, I think that Joe Biden did everything he possibly could given the circumstances. I don't think he could have gotten realistically Joe Manchin or Sinema to like move further left and get more stuff done. But so like, how do we on the left like respond to this political reality where like, I agree with you when I hear like Hassan come on my podcast and say it's not enough, like people are really struggling and they're hurting and they need to be paid more and they're overworked, and like I agree with that. I'm a good progressive. I feel bad for working class people, but I don't know. I look at the political landscape around me and I don't know what to do or how to change it. And it seems to me that there's this like, there's losing a perspective on like what people, even if you don't actually believe it to be true, but losing a perspective on what people perceive the Democratic Party to be. And that's this thing that is, or losing a perspective on what American politics is and has been for a number of years now, which is just like sort of like, and particularly the Democrats should be the people who like progressive Democrats who are not like the people on Pod Save America. Like, I know that they're not socialists and reading Marx for fun, but they should be very susceptible to this idea of like billionaires are buying elections, sort of like welfare for the rich and capitalism for the poor type, whatever way of messaging that leftists hop on their podcasts and say, but then they get lost. They lose the idea that Dems are incapable. It's like, it doesn't click to them that this problem makes Dems incapable of messaging, because they keep asking the question, well, what do we do about the message? How do we communicate our wins? How do we message? How do we give clear, you know, Republicans have like guns or have anti-abortion or have their, you know, whatever, their specific thing that like they can get excited for. And how do we as Dems give them their shiny toys, their thing to get excited for? And when we on the left say like, okay, like universal healthcare or something, like let's give them a shiny toy. Let's just tell everyone we're going to give you all healthcare and you don't have to, it's not going to be tied to your employer as our shiny toy or whatever. Whatever, any sort of like universal program that's not incredibly means tested and then feels like all just like, is that even going to apply to me? Yeah. Is we can't message it because we can't even come close to following through given the sort of like material conditions of, I don't even know if I want to use the material conditions on that one, but just the reality of like modern politics. And
well, because they don't want to piss off their donors, right? Like, so that's kind of what this comes down to.
Yeah, both parties are running on social issues and on the culture war and on whatnot, and certain issues which they can have some say in. But in terms of like making lives better for a lot of people, neither party is running on that because that's not how either party is funded. And
because
so
they can't. They
Dems have nothing.
They literally can't.
Yeah, they literally can't. So this is the dilemma, and it's frustrating because the Pod Save America guys are like, they see
They're
it.
so close. They're so close.
They see it, and they ask this question like, I don't know what to do with this tension. But it's like as Anyways, I'll shut up in just a second and let you give
No, please go on.
But so I view this as like, you imagine there's sort of like whatever the moderate political position is in American politics, and it sort of shifts, or sort of like the political pulse of the country, and maybe it shifts left and right, and maybe we imagine like a true democracy, quote unquote true democracy, whatever that means, one person, one vote. It's like pure democracy. No, we get big money out of politics, this, that, the whole other shebang, and shit moves a little bit left, it moves a little bit right, and individual actors who are good at conveying messaging can move things left, can then move things right. And so there's this very well-intentioned and natural reaction from like progressive Pod Save America type people to say, okay, well, we've got no choice when we look at Trump and whatnot. We've got to just, as the country, like I agree with you, leftist who comes on my podcast and complains about how we're just continually shifting further and further right. But all we can do is just keep fighting back and try and move it back in the other direction. And then if you're not confronting at least the possibility, maybe you conclude you don't believe it, but if you're not confronting at least the possibility that the people who are responsible for the shift right are doing so in such a way with enough power and enough money that individual actors can't do anything other than just slow down the shift, then we're not actually engaging with reality as it is. And things are just going to keep moving further right. And you're going to yell at us on the left, like, for complaining about this shift and saying that we're getting in the way of trying to fight back. But like we're trying to scream and wave our hands and say like, hey, maybe, imagine this in a business sense. Like maybe all this effort is just being wasted and we're trying to save a program that's dying, or we're trying to save an idea that clearly isn't working. And so like there needs to be some response to this. And it seems like they're avoiding the idea, that in a way that a lot of people are, because it's scary and no one wants to confront the possible reality that their like individual actions aren't really moving the needle. But anyways,
yeah,
that's my...
Well, I think one of the bigger issues there is they talk about running to the center, and it seems like the bet they were making there is like, all right, well, the Republicans have gone so off the rails at this point that like we can pick up a lot of kind of like more moderate Republican voters ultimately by running to the center. And so within that framework, that idea probably makes sense, especially given that like the left, like the real left of the Democratic Party in America, is small and not that influential, right? But I think the bigger problem here is like one of understanding, which is that when you kind of collapse every political issue down to like a one-dimensional like left-right thing, like you've lost the plot, and it leaves you totally unable to address what's actually going on, instead of like looking at people's actual circumstances and kind of like parsing out issues. Like what does it mean to run to the center at this point? Like genuinely. I mean, that makes sense, and it probably made sense in a political framework of like 12 years ago. I think that the framing now is wrong, which compounds with every other issue that you've identified.
And another, if we were to pick 10 random Americans who identify as moderate out of a hat and throw them in a room together, and say to them, and before we ask them any of them questions about like, do you identify as like very liberal, very conservative, whatever, you ask them that to do that self-labeling test, but then you ask them questions on policies. Like this is a well-known thing. I know I'm not breaking any news, but you ask them positions and policies, they'll be all over the fucking map. Some of their policies will be very far left, some of them will be very far right, and that at the end of the day, the only thing they agree on is that they all identify as moderate. So, seems that this point, which is pretty well understood by this isn't just some like socialist or leftist talking point. Like I hear this from political science-y folks all the time and people all over the political spectrum, but but then when people say they identify as moderate in a poll, the Team Kamala folks hear that and say, all right, we've got to make our candidates sound like they're as in the middle of the two parties as possible.
Yes. Yep.
And it seems like a mistaken it's a generalization that doesn't really
it doesn't track
apply
it's like
to any individual issue. Yeah.
Like a multi-dimensional possibility space of like preferred policies, but they kind of scrunch it all down to just like, well, they're keep an eye out for my new documentary on YouTube, What is a Centrist, where I go talk to a bunch of centrists and reveal that there is actually no such thing.
No such fucking thing.
Yeah. So, and ultimately, like, when you run in that direction, it's kind of like the more soulless you become, which I know is like totally vibes based. And, if anyone part of Team Kamala would reject that wholesale. But I really think people can tell, especially in the age of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
When you're trying to manufacture a candidate, I don't think it works as well anymore.
And people can also tell, I mean, there's also this sort of like, I don't know what I'm looking for here, but sort of like mythical centrist that Dems, like Democratic strategists, idealize, like this someone who comes across as just like the pure moderate. Like in Democratic strategists' mind, the perfect candidate is someone who Americans hear them talk and label them as moderate, but their policies are actually just sort of like liberalish.
Yeah.
So that's their dream candidate, is everyone labels them as a moderate, as someone who's reasonable, who will work with anyone to get things done, but their policies just so happen to be liberalish. Anyways, whether or not that person exists, I don't know. But there are also multiple ways, right, that how one comes across as centrist, there are many ways to try and go about implementing it too. It's not just like, oh, Dems want, it's not as simple as like, let's imagine a world where Dems want universal healthcare and Republicans want like no government subsidized healthcare at all and just want everything to be private. And, you can, so one way to try and come across as a moderate is to say, to pick your candidate and say, okay, you're going to run on, the ACA or whatever. Imagine the ACA doesn't exist and call it whatever you want to call it. So that's one way of doing it. But I don't think people actually, and I don't know how to prove this. This is just me theorizing. That type of politics, like, isn't exact. I don't think is actually super effective, because a lot of the time people really feel strongly one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And someone who's really, if you've got a large group of people who are really into universal healthcare, large people who are like fully convinced on private healthcare is the answer, and they at the same time they identify as politically moderate and they want someone who will just work with anyone to get things done, and they answer this question, they respond to that, to all the polls saying that they identify as all the moderate shit. And then they hear someone come along and say, I want a position that's right between the two. They go, but I really wanted I thought the other thing was going to help me the most. Yeah. And so there's that problem. But there's another problem. There's another way of going about trying to do it, which is to say, okay, Kamala, you're going to grab Liz Cheney with one hand and you're going to grab Bernie with the other, or grab AOC with the other. And you guys are all going to get up there and like smile. And, you're going to be, you got someone who's far right, bullshit. Someone who's far left.
Bullshit.
And
yeah.
People see that, and the other response to that is to go, you aren't committed to anything. Literally all you care about is winning. And so there's almost no good way to do this. And the people who poll well, who identify as moderate, are people who didn't need to, who no strategist came along and told them to start speaking in moderate speak. Mm-hmm. They just naturally come from that.
Yeah, those are their actual political convictions.
Yeah, that's their actual political beliefs. And those people kind of drive me nuts, but there's a genuine, like, what was the guy running as an independent in, was it Nebraska?
I don't know.
What I'm talking about?
Remember.
He had a good chance of winning, and he come from like a union sort of like labor background, but he had this sort of like modern moderate thing of like being very pro labor, but also like very, very, very tough on crime. Probably if you'd asked him about any woke shit, would probably have bad things to say about political correctness and whatever. So that's sort of, not that he would agree in any way, shape, or form with JD Vance, but he's like the liberal version of the moderate.
Yeah, sure.
But he has that sort of like Midwestern sort of tough guy, like could have been a Navy SEAL energy, mm-hmm. who's taking it out on like, fuck the corporations, I'm pro labor. But at the same time, a lot of it, like his social views are a little more conservative. Anyways, it comes across as just a genuine, and he has no history of doing politics. And then he starts doing interviews and he'll start to say things like, as a guy who was never involved into politics until at my job, someone asked me to hop in charge of the union and I started doing union work. And then, and now here I am running because, I think it matters and whatever. Someone who's not a lifelong politician who comes along and they say that, like, and I just get pissed because no one gets anything done and everything's so partisan and I just want to help people. It comes across as like genuine-ish, right? Yeah. But you can't turn Kamala, people don't forget that she was running on Medicare for All and a Green New Deal and all this shit
Yeah, which
in 2020.
probably, I mean, I strongly suspect is probably what she actually believes in, if she believes in anything, which I'd like to think she does. I don't think she's a soulless person. I think those are probably are her actual commitments deep down, but like also she's probably more, she's more committed to winning than she is to her commitments, which makes sense. And ultimately, if you're around a bunch of strategists who are telling you this is how you win, then it makes sense that that's how you change your messaging. So
yeah, and expecting people to be Donald Trump and win all their aides, when all the people who have all the money, when all the people who have all the stakes. Like, another thing that's important to imagine here is for a lot of people to imagine ourselves in Kamala's shoes when there is nonstop pressure from staffers and people who are funding your campaign and yada, yada, yada. I think if people really imagine what it's like to be in that position, it's sad, but her sense of agency has got to be very limited.
Yeah,
and
I would imagine so.
Yeah, you feel pressure, and you feel like you're going to get yelled at if you make a joke that hasn't been tested yet, right? And when you've got that level of pressure on you, whether you realize it or not, it's unless you're genuinely like have narcissistic tendencies, like it's gonna affect you.
Yeah, that's the Democrat machine. They get very good at apparently disciplining people and in all the wrong kinds of ways. So, Maybe they just do need like a narcissistic like asshole just to like get up there and not take shit from anyone. Because this is the problem. I mean, like most smart people will listen to people who have more perceived experience than they do, right? So you need someone who's kind of dumb, narcissistic, and a little sociopathic, I think. Yeah. Maybe not. I don't know.
Maybe. I'm not going to pretend like when it comes to predicting what kind of person lands well with people, I feel like I'm bad at that. I'm bad at that. I don't think many people are good at it. I am. Do you think, cringe or potentially good take, what's his actual name? Kyle Kalinske has been big on the Jon Stewart bandwagon 2028.
I don't think so.
Do you think he would land well?
I think he might land okay. He feels too like establishment adjacent to me. I don't know. I'm just getting a je ne sais quoi in terms of something just doesn't, because he's like, I mean, I guess he's immediate. Maybe I could be brought around to it, but
have you
off the dome,
listened to any of the stuff he's done in longer form content since he left Comedy Central in the past few years?
A little bit. I mean, like he's a smart guy.
Pretty Bernie pilled, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think. I don't hate it, but I think he probably, because of his history and the association of sort of like late night TV host with being just like spokesperson for the Democratic Party, I think he could come across as it would be like trying to run George Clooney or something, you know. It's better. It's just it's a bit much. It's just a bit much. Yeah. So I don't know. Anyways, but I'm curious what you think about. I also like get driven nuts by the Dems for all this sort of focus group testing and all the shit we've talked about. And maybe we think, and it sounds like we do, and a lot of people do, think that they're sort of playing the game of politics pretty poorly. And I think that there's one of the things you hear from leftists a lot online is basically just like the American people are, if policy by policy, are sort of like much more left than they are right, or more liberal than they are whatever word you want to use. And so the reason Dems lose is just because of like they suck at the game of politics. And maybe that's an oversimplification, but do you think that because of on the left, our frustration with feeling sort of like played by the game, our tendency to want to call the game out and be honest gets in the way of us playing politics?
Yes, 100%. I think it does, but I also think that if that Pod Save America Kamala team interview was evidence of anything, it's that there needs to be people with our disposition in the room where these conversations are happening, even if we're not necessarily driving anything, which, to be honest, in the next 2 election cycles, like I don't think there's going to be a massive progressive shift. or a massive, not even progressive, but just like cynic, like these sort of more cynical voices are not going to be the dominant ones in the Democratic Party. How could they be? But I think there's kind of, there is a need for I guess more of a political realism, and not just in the sense of like looking at polls and data in the Democratic Party. So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer the question? Does that even make sense? Okay.
No, it's just it's a conversation that I think is interesting to be had, because I had a couple of thoughts while listening to the Kamala interview, or I had a lot of thoughts. But on this note, I was also just thinking about how, like, just related to this, I was thinking of sort of like a concern I have amongst the left is that we're falling victim to the sort of liberal notion that we're falling victim way too often to the very like liberal idea that if you got a bunch of people in a room, the best idea will just sort of like naturally rise to the top. And that if it's one person, one vote in a room full of 20 people and we're debating whatever topic it is and everyone gets to have their say as to what they think is the best option, that like the best answer will just come to the top. And so there's almost this feeling of like inevitability of like, well, look, the sort of like neoliberal takeover of the Democratic Party is really stupid. It's really bad for people. There's almost this feeling of like, we almost don't have to do anything. The idea will present itself to people and people will become aware of it and join our side.
Yep. Yeah, we definitely need to do something. Let me be clear.
So I don't know. Do you agree that there's that sentiment of just like,
yeah, for sure.
And and I was like, even in a world where, you know, it's you and it, like there, I guess it's sort of my frustration with Hassan is that the spokesperson for your movement like matters like more than the ideas behind it. I think
that's probably true. Yeah. I think Hassan is probably like, I think he's good at messaging to a certain demographic of people, but he can't be the only guy.
Yeah, he can't be the only one. Maybe that's my frustration.
Yeah.
He can't be the only one. I don't want him to be the only one.
And it really does feel like he's kind of in the progressive niche, although probably in terms of moving the Dems, Hassan is probably too far left. But I think, you know, if you're going to build a big tent party, like, I don't know, maybe there should be room for people like that.
Yeah. Did you hear so the guy who was calling in virtually, David Plouffe, one of the points at which I paused the podcast in my car and like actually just yelled was when he said Democrats need to rethink how we engage with super PACs and start looking at Republicans for modeling our way of dealing with super PACs, and that we're like being too moral with with the way we handle them, and we've got to.
Yeah, you're right, man.
Yeah,
that's your problem, is you don't have enough fucking money.
Yeah,
that was the issue. Hold on, I got to swap my headphone.
So.
Yeah, dude,
in case anyone thought they were going to move left as a reaction to this.
No, they're definitely not.
No, they're just going to hop in.
I feel like those fucking people who were part of that interview need to be fired immediately. Because if I hired even like a business consultant and they failed to do what I asked them to do, and then they came in and they were just like, we had a really difficult job, and in many ways we succeeded. but then they didn't do the one thing they said they were going to do, which is win. It's like, okay, enough excuses. Like, either show me that you learned something and you'll do better next time, but like, Jesus Christ. And I get it, like, they're emotional and stuff and they're bummed that they lost, but, you know, aren't they supposed to be fucking professionals? Like, I don't know, man.
Yeah,
very disappointing.
Yeah, and the point that they keep bringing up is they'll say, well, look at the 7 battleground states. You know, okay, so first they'll say 107 days, and then they'll say, because of that, we only had time to campaign in the battleground states. That's the only place we ran a bunch of we really focused on ads in the battleground states. We focused on our ground game only in the battleground states. So you heard Plouffe say this over and over again, right? Like, if you lived in Massachusetts or California or New York or Texas or Florida or wherever, you didn't experience the election the same way that people in the battleground states did. First off, like, no fucking shit. I think anyone who follows politics,
for sure,
understands this. But the other point is that, so then they go on to say, well, look, and she lost less ground comparing her to Joe Biden, just the prior election. She lost less ground to Joe in the battleground states than she did in non-battleground states. So that, you know, we were up against a tough political environment where country was moving far right, or was moving right, and we were actually successful because we slowed down the movement. But once again, first off, if the states in which you put all your energy did nothing in the polls, then yikes almighty. I mean, like, the fact that you had an effect in the states that you campaigned in isn't once again, like you're saying, like a proof of like winning. It's just that you're campaigning to something, I guess.
Yeah, like, yeah, I fucking like, hope it did. Like, imagine if it did. Like, yeah, of course.
Like, that's great. But also, you work for, like, you are effectively the most important strategists behind the Democratic Party. And stop trying to separate yourself from being part of the problem as to why the country is shifting right. Yeah. You fucking Nimrod.
It's just like they view it as this
environment.
This just like exogenous problem that just like is happening, and like they don't know. Yeah. I mean, that's the core of it. It's like this to them is apparently just this thing that's happening, and no one knows why, and we don't know why. Like, what the fuck is your job then if not to figure that out?
Happen. Not great. Quite sad.
Very sad. Also, like, the weird thing about all of this is that, like, you're telling me that there was no Biden succession plan. Like, I don't want to be glib, but the guy is, like, 82 years old. It's a real possibility that he could have just, like, had a heart attack or fallen down a flight of stairs and, like, died. And you're telling me there was no contingency planning within the party is, like, what if that happens?
Which, once again, is the most fucking... Having grown up in a family of... Having grown up in an area... I grew up in an Ivy League town. This is the most Ivy League town fucking bullshit of like, oh, but it would be disrespectful. It would be disrespectful.
Yeah. It would be disrespectful to Joe Biden.
It wouldn't be polite, you know. Don't put your elbows on the table. Fucking shit.
Permanently New England pilled. New England.
Yeah, it's like you're playing. If you believe that it's weird, there's this weird tension between like, if you really believe that your candidates are better for people, then this obsession with being respectful to Joe Biden is just weird. It's weird.
He's weird. Well, he's the soul of the party. I mean, that's it. Yeah.
But we also need to remember, and I need to go back and look at the history because I don't want to say this with 100% confidence. And I'm not saying Biden wouldn't have won. But do you remember the 2020 primary?
Yeah, dude, it was fucking wild shit, right?
Yeah, Bernie was... I'm not saying it was like more likely than not that Bernie was going to win. But Bernie was doing Buttigieg was doing Joe Biden came in 4th in New Hampshire, if I remember correctly. And then, bada boom, bada bing, everyone drops out of the race except for Biden and Elizabeth Warren, who's the only one who's going to steal Bernie votes. So the idea that Joe Biden was like the chosen nominee, I mean, everyone dropped out so fast and at the same exact time right before Super fucking Tuesday. So I'm not even saying it would have been Bernie per se, but the idea that it wouldn't have been Pete Buttigieg or it wouldn't have been someone else, I don't fucking know. Maybe it would have been.
Probably like if I'm a Democrat strategist at that point, like probably Biden is the best pick, just given the circumstances of 2020 at that point.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But is that to say that that's who people would have necessarily voted for as their chosen representative of the Democratic Party? I don't know.
I'm going to say probably, but it is a little bit of an open question.
I mean, he came in 4th in fucking New Hampshire, man. I don't know.
But New Hampshire's also special.
But it was a state he should have done well in. I don't know. Anyways, I don't think he'd won a state until a bunch of people started dropping out. I need to go back and relook at it. But it's just whatever. Regardless, I mean, the other thing to remember, and you had brought this up on another podcast, is just like speaking of the political winds, which are like affecting elections. Like COVID was a fucking like gift on a silver platter, and the way Trump handled COVID was a gift on a silver fucking platter to the Democrats too. So also, had there been no COVID, who knows? Like who
genuinely I mean, if there hadn't been COVID, I am 85% sure that Trump would have won a second term. Almost no doubt. I mean, the economy was doing well. Jan 6 doesn't have, well, I mean, Jan 6 happened after we lost already, but like,
so that wouldn't have been a thing.
I mean, like, yeah, probably like Trump probably would have happened. Trump probably would have won 2020 in a world without COVID.
Yeah. You can never say. It's hard to know explicitly. But I think that in the same way that you can make the argument that 2024 isn't even like it isn't even that there's all these other political forces, and it's not even necessarily about Trump as it is like anti-incumbency, fucking inflation, whatever. I don't know. You can say all the same shit about 2020 is that it's not some big, I don't know. But anyways, it's not the most relevant point, because even if the Democrats really were big Joe Biden people, like we all loved some Joe, and his approval rating amongst Democrats was really, really good. It still is like being president isn't fucking some shit you're owed. And thank you for being the guy who won. Like, that's pretty dope of you.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you for beating Donald. That's very, very nice, very cool of you. But you're not owed anything.
We don't owe you, Joe.
We don't owe you anything.
We are grateful for your service, but we don't owe you. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's fucking hopping politics. I don't know.
Politics, baby. Moving on to the Hassan episode. Pod Save America. The ultimate palate cleanser for me. Is just going, oh, yes, yes. Jail the Walton family. Lock them up. I don't give a fuck. Heads need to start rolling, not literally, metaphorically. Put them in jail, though. Build the public housing, put the Waltons in jail. Fuck it.
Fuck it.
That's the Democratic Party I want. But yeah, basically, I think Hassan is right about everything except for his ideas about being able to like whip Manchin into shape and stuff. Like, I think his actual specifics on strategy are a little out there and probably wouldn't work as well as he would like. But other than that, I'm on board.
Yeah. I think if you put Hassan in the position of political power, I think he'd be really bad at politics.
I think he probably would as well. Yeah.
So Hassan is, here's my new take on Hassan. This is where I'm at with Hassan. Is that he has consumed, because of all his time streaming, he has consumed every fucking podcast, video, debate, whatever, known to modern American leftist anything. And so when it comes to reciting the conclusion that are good, Hassan is very good. If you put Hassan, the problem is that, and this is going to sound a little bit sort of condescending to me, but I don't give a fuck. And I would say this about myself too. Like, I wouldn't want to be the spokesperson of the left because I haven't done enough of the fucking reading. And if you put me up against someone who has quote unquote done the reading, or someone who has really worked on the ground in the game of politics, like even someone like people at Pod Save America who have worked in politics and actually been there, his ideas about how to like do politics and his ideas about how like what's going on in the world are very sort of like he read the summary but not the paper.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because a lot of people don't want to fucking read the paper, and so communicating to people all the summaries is great. Like, awesome. Thank you, Hassan. Good work. Important work. But yeah, just in terms of like the part of me that wants someone who could, if I genuinely believed a really, if a really good communicator, if you put like Hassan and Pete Buttigieg in a room together and said debate, like, oh God.
Yeah,
like,
Hassan would get smoked. Yeah.
It would not go well. So I want like our person who goes on Pod Save America to be someone who I think is a good commentator. That's my thing. But yeah, it's important to, and it's also just, it's classic that Pod Save America did, Tim Miller and Bulwark or whatever.
Is that like a YouTube channel or like some kind of media network thing?
It's a new media, it's basically a Lincoln Project kind of fucking shit. Tim Miller worked on Jeb Bush's campaign in 2016.
Yeah.
Let me Google this to make sure, because it makes the dunk much funnier if that is indeed true. Hoppin'.
All right.
Okay. Tim Miller is an American political commentator, writer, and former political consultant. He was spokesperson for the Republican National Committee during Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential bid and communications director for Jeb Bush's 2016 presidential campaign. Probably just woke up the whole house. But anyways. Yaha, baby. Hoppin'.
Miller.
Tim Miller. I got distracted. I have perpetual fear of waking people up when they're sleeping. I got yelled at a lot about that as a kid. Hoppin'.
Trauma time.
Hoppin'. Guys, can you turn the TV down? It's on like 6, Mom. I can't even hear it. Yeah. Anyways, Tim Miller. So this guy Yeah, worked for Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush, and now has like a anti-Trump media network. He's
a rhino.
Yeah, he's a good old fashioned Republican. But this motherfucker was doing podcasts with and collaborating with and doing interviews with the Pod Save America guys this whole fall, and they're joking and they're laughing and they're having a good time, and there's no hint whatsoever of combativeness between them at all. And I had to pause as someone who gets pretty bad, like sort of like secondhand anxiety when there's like tension in a room. I had to pause the Hassan and Lovett interview multiple times because I'm like, oh my God, this is like tense. I get more anxious about that than most folks, but it was like, that's the other takeaway, and this is not new, but it's just like, we can't, why is Hassan so much more of an enemy than Tim fucking Miller?
Yeah, literal. Well, I mean that just shows their real ideological disposition, right? Because they're all various flavors of small L liberals. Yeah, it's disgusting. That's the most disgusting thing.
Also, based of love it to be a Zionist, to still describe himself as a Zionist.
Conversation, I was on edge throughout that whole part of the discussion, and that could have gone much worse though. It ultimately ended up being kind of milquetoast, but
I'm not going to pretend I know enough about that. But just in the current era of progressive politics, to just like, I would just take even if that's what I believed, I would take a little bit of a hiatus on using the Z word to describe myself.
I think that you're
he's also Jewish, and I don't know what to, what.
No comment. No, as a non-Jewish person, no comment. Although someone did accuse me of Jew baiting, I have been accused of queer baiting and Jew baiting. But yeah.
Do you have a big takeaway from the interview?
From the Hassan interview?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the hostility to these people and not taking Hassan more seriously is probably a mistake. And no, I don't know. I feel like you covered it out pretty well. And these people are liberals. Hassan's a leftist, and that's the tension right there.
It's a good old tension.
Some good old tension. I will say, funniest part, did you get to the part where they start talking about Ozempic?
Yeah, I listened to the whole interview.
Where
they talk about Ozempic.
Or where the guy's name, Lovett, his last name?
That's his last name is, Lovett.
Yeah, where Mr. Lovett is talking to Hassan about like his workout program and his nude progress pictures. And he's like, how did you do that? And Hassan is like, I counted my calories. And Lovett's like, and what does that do? And Hassan's like, that's what it does. And Mr. Lovett he makes reference to being on some kind of semaglutide something, whatever, basically like an Ozempic-like drug, and apparently that's how he lost a bunch of weight. But isn't that so indicative of the liberal I don't know why. There's a liberal softness. There's something wrong with the liberal men.
Yeah. Well, now you're being homophobic, my dude.
Not being homophobic, dude. There's so many fucking fit gay guys. The average gay guy.
It's calling him soft. That's bad.
No, like, he is soft. I'd call him that if he was straight or whatever. Soft. He is soft.
Yeah, I think the guy who interviewed the Kamala team is softer. That guy is
softer.
That guy is big soft. He was like apologizing to them. He's like, sorry for harassing you for an hour and a half.
Dude, it's a fucking interview. That's like literally the point. That's your job, dude.
To end the interview with like, thank you for the work you've done. You guys have done
Thank you for losing, you fucking losers. Jesus Christ.
Unbelievable. To thank them. Yeah,
there's a real problem of ionizing.
Not enough winners in the Democratic Party.
Not enough winners. I don't want to be like, there's a problem of like worshiping weakness, because like, what the fuck does that even mean? But there's this weird, like, self-flagellatory kind of, like, I'm a white man, and I hate that about myself. In a way, but it like, totally abdicates them from actually taking responsibility or fucking doing anything. It's just, like, self-flagellation, and nothing fucking changed. It's the same problem I have with, and now we're deep enough in the podcast where I can say this, the same problem I have with land acknowledgments, which, I get the point, which is that, like, yeah, like, it's really a good thing to acknowledge that this happened, But when you do it every time, it feels like you're literally just rubbing in that, like, yeah, we took this fucking land from you. And like, yeah, we acknowledge that we did it. Now it, yeah.
Yeah, there was I wish I could remember the exact context, but Ben Burgess, have you heard of him?
No.
He was doing a podcast with someone I'd never heard of. And they were interviewing Amber
Lee Frost, yeah.
Amber Lee.
Is
it Chapo? It's not Ailey.
I actually don't know, but Amber Frost
Frost of the House.
The House.
And Ben's co-host was telling a story of how one time he was like touring in New Mexico, and his co-host is black, and he's like, he was about to go on stage and perform, and he was told he had to wait because before he was allowed on stage, they needed to do some like land acknowledgement thing, and that maybe they're telling him he had to participate in the land acknowledgement thing or something because he's not Native American. I don't know. He was telling this. He's like, Jesus. I don't remember the exact context, but anyways, just yeah. If you're at a point in time where you feel it is appropriate to tell a black man to go participate in a land acknowledgement,
it's time to rethink some things.
Maybe it's time to rethink a few things. Yeah, I don't know. The performative,
it's the lived version of thoughts and prayers. Yeah. We'll just say this, and this will like change things. We'll just think about it, then like things will get better. Yeah.
Did you watch Amber's interview with Citarella?
Yes. Good interview.
The part where she mentioned that the author of White Fragility,
Robin DiAngelo. Is that
Well, what's the book?
I think it's How to Be Anti-Racist.
Is that what it's called?
We thinking of the same book here?
We're thinking of the same author, but I thought White was in the
wrong
name.
person. That's Ibram X. Kendi.
Robin DiAngelo wrote a book that has white in the name, I think.
I think
it's like why white people can't talk about race or something.
Sure.
Anyways, but
wait
Amber,
a minute. Is Robin DiAngelo a white woman?
Yeah.
What? No. This is what? I feel gaslit right now. I feel like I'm actually losing it. What?
Yeah, I need someone to verify it for me, but did you catch the part where Amber said that she like donated like $20,000 to a specific black man as reparations? Or I don't know if it was a man, black person.
I think I remember that part of the podcast. I
don't know where she got that information. I couldn't find it. So maybe fake news.
It seems true. It
sounds like the kind of thing which could have happened. Yeah.
Dude, I can't. I thought, because I was like, okay, this is like, she's doing these like anti-racism training things, and like, okay, I was like, I guess this is like some black lady, making money, and I was like, well, almost can't fault her for it,
Yeah.
But the fact that she's like a white consultant makes me feel so much worse.
Making money off of white guilt.
Yeah, dude. This is such a great business move.
Yeah, because people are struggling with it.
People are
struggling with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Also, she may have plagiarized her doctoral thesis. What? No way.
Been there, done that.
You plagiarized your thesis?
I would like put like a page, like a quote that was like a page long, and be like, "This proves that X," and then just have another quote that's like a page long, and be like, "And this says."
That's not plagiarism. That's just lazy.
It's hopping. I put the quotes around it, so you technically can't call me a plagiarizer, but to describe my senior thesis as having an original thought would be hopping.
Okay, sure, but it's not Dude, this is crazy. If she plagiarized her thesis from like non-white academics,
yeah, no,
her entire career is like built on horse shit. That's crazy. Oh my god, I can't get over this. This is so fucked up.
Dude, you just
brain on liberalism.
You look at her and you just imagine like family dinner, like cocktails before dinner with Robin DiAngelo. Like, oh,
dude,
hopping. What is her book? What the fuck is it?
White
it is White Fragility. Okay.
Yes, you were right with your first
Yeah.
First guest. Wow.
Yeah.
East.
Yeah, it's good shit.
Good stuff.
Fucking stuff. Hopping.
Speaking of weird people, speaking of bizarre people, have you investigated my favorite Twitter niche micro celebrity of this past couple
Maya
weeks?
Poet. I had actually been introduced to Maya prior to you linking her.
Really?
I just had seen people being like, look at this person. Hopping. This is it is okay. So I know we dunked on Noah Samson in a prior episode, but he does the way he introduces like manosphere guys. He's just like his bit of like, today we're gonna look at a couple of guys. I do find it to be very funny. It's like, we've got a new genre of guy. And I'm like, and that's the way I was introduced to Maya. It's like, got a new look at this person thing. Yeah. Hopping. You in a Twitter account. The reason she'd come into my feed is because of Israel stuff. Had nothing to do with the detransitioning thing. Hopping. Yeah. What an interesting combination of.
What a person.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on?
Are you familiar with detransitioners? Like, is this something
I hadn't heard of this prior to Maya, so I'm very new to this.
All right, so this is like for the audience. This is like when someone who thought they were trans, so it's when someone transitions and then they detransition, and that's all it means. But statistically, most of these people end up detransitioning basically because of like social pressure, or because it's easier to live as their assigned gender than it is to go through with transitioning. So they detransition. But there's some people who just like it was a genuine mistake and it just like doesn't work out for whatever reason, and that's fine. And then there's some people who, I'm not saying that Maya Poet is still has some gender stuff going on, but like still has some gender stuff going on, but has decided that this is like the right-wing grift that they're going to do. I think like Jeffree Star is like another example of this. Do you know who Jeffree Star is?
I feel like I've heard the name.
All right, hold on. We're gonna pull up screen share and we're gonna see if this works.
American makeup artist Jeffree Star.
Yeah, so this
Can
you see this, by the way? Is this working?
Yes, I can. Is this working?
Is this working?
Is this plugged in?
Yeah, so this guy, this new genre of guy, I think was even using like they them pronouns at some point in like the mid-10s. And then decided to be like a kind of softly right-wing person who's like, I'm not down with all that they-them shit.
It's not. I don't think he's definitely not trans, but you know Scott Tressler or whatever?
I'm sure that I do.
Okay, next we'll look into Scott Tressler.
Okay.
And listen to him talk.
Jeffree Star slams non-binary people. How are you with they?
What incredible.
Incredible stuff. For the record, I think it's fine to be someone who identifies as a guy and looks like this. I actually don't think it's a problem. I just think that like shitting on people, like, dude, it's not like the conservatives are going to be like, actually, you're fine and based because you still identify as a man. They're coming for you next, pal. You're not getting away with this. They're not okay with you. They're going to pretend like they are, but they're fucking not, dude.
Yeah. I mean, for every movement, there's going to be a grift. Reactionary grift. But, yeah, it's kind of sad.
It is sad, honestly.
It doesn't
get human about it for a minute.
It doesn't take much intellectual rigor to think through, like, okay, maybe some people think they're trans and then realize they're not. Maybe that can be real. Yeah, but to project your own experience onto everyone else and say, hey, what I'm going through with my own unique just life experience, like, or identity, like sense of like building my sense of identity must be how everyone else is experiencing it, is just like one of the instant red flags for me of like, you're just a dumb person.
Yeah. My experience is universal.
Yeah,
all
universalizing.
Or fake.
Yeah.
What?
That
doesn't follow at all.
Yeah, I mean, if the next time I hear a trans person say, actually, we're all trans, and everyone who's going think everyone has these feelings repressed, this is like
no.
Yeah, we don't have the left wing equivalent of that. So far as I know, there aren't many trans people hopping on Twitter saying, actually, we guys, it's actually really simple. Just men are women and women are men.
Actually, we just need to cross everything. Yeah, dude. I actually, not that I ever thought this at any point, but I have heard some trans people say that, like, just all men deep down wanted to be women, and that they just assumed that that was, like, a normal thing.
Yeah. What? I can imagine that being maybe they don't. I'm curious to hear what you think. Like, maybe they don't phrase it as like want to be woman, but maybe it's as particularly as people start to experience these sort of like crises of identity. I can see how it'd be easy to assume that like most people would experience some of the like the draw towards traditionally feminine traits or qualities or whatever, or drive to, I don't know. I could see how people might think that that's. I think particularly as teenagers, it's very easy to think like, what I'm experiencing is much more universal than it is.
Yeah, when you're a delusional teenager. Yeah.
Hop in questions. Or that no one does, and that you're a freak.
You're a freak. No one has ever experienced this, ever. And you're just wrong. Yeah, for sure. The funny thing about the Maya Poet situation is that she never medically transitioned in any way. So she was just using, like, he, him pronouns.
And
stopped. Finding her chest, and then she stopped. She's
so like, kind of making a very pro-trans argument. Gender's a little fluid.
In a sense, maybe in a sort of dialectical way. Maya Poet is actually like the most trans person.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny that like she hasn't really altered her presentation from being masculine presenting. Which is fine. Yeah. It's fine to be a fucking masculine presenting woman or a feminine presenting man. It's not fine to shit on people and also be like, have this weird like MAGA thing going on. Like, they all think you're stupid. You're like, they're all laughing at you behind your back, Maya. I hope you know that. And I hope your fucking 15 minutes of Twitter fame is worth it. Fuck, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe they actually do all love her. I don't know.
No, I mean, she's gay. Like, no, they don't.
Okay, is she actually still get? How long?
That's
how
part
long
of what I read was that she part of her supposed confusion was that she thought because she was lesbian that she must be a guy or something.
Gotcha. Exist detransistor.
I think I read that on
East.
Was that on her Twitter? Or no, she linked to like a speech or something. I don't know. But yeah, you're never going to be invited to sit. Like they'll point at you and say, hey, look, like, get owned, liberal. But you're not going to sit at the cool kids table. Like, yeah. You're not going to get a seat at the cool kids table. You're not going to be given any respect.
Very unfortunate. Dude, I'm still shook about this Robin DiAngelo being a white woman thing. I can't get over this. Jesus.
Maybe I am too riddled with white guilt, but the idea of making my profession as a white guy talking about race, just, I don't know.
Seems crazy. Right?
Crazy.
But I mean, if she can get the bag, then like maybe there's hope for all of us. No matter how incompetent you are, you can just plagiarize people and then fucking guilt trip your way into a position of making money.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's what it's all fucking about, is making money.
Making money, getting the bag. All right, well. Any closing remarks?
I think we covered the pod save stuff. I do not think I do have any closing remarks. Yeah. Life is chugging along. I got a part-time job. I guess that's my final remark, is I am now I have upped my working class status here because I am now a 2-job having person to pay the bills. So I can really use that as my victim thing. Of my sense of victimhood.
What is your part-time job?
I'm doing AV at a church.
Oh yeah, dude.
Running their meetings.
All right.
But it's like one of them socialist churches, so their hashtags.
Is it a UU church or a UCC church?
Church. I think it's. It was like at one point in the area there was like there was a Unitarian Universalist. There was also a congregational, and they like merged it into one. So I don't think they use one or the other.
Yeah, they do that sometimes. The UU and the UCC. They're like this.
Now they just call it a church.
Just a church.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah.
And then next week
for
when we
book club tomorrow night,
Catholics.
episode 1.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're doing book club tomorrow night. Yeah. All right. We're going to talk about the history of economic thought. Oh boy, thrilling.
Very exciting.
Buy it. I hope you are. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a good time. You done the reading yet?
I'm like 75% of the way done. I will probably wrap it up tomorrow morning.
Very cool. Alrighty. Until next time.
All right. Wait, don't hang up your thing until